around 2800 BC, in Mesopotamia. The nomadic herders, who'd been living along the rivers there for centuries, had grown tired of being nomads. They wanted a king, but it wasn't easy finding one. It took years for them to agree on one guy. And then, when they finally settled on a guy named Ari, he didn't even want the job. Oh, but he came around eventually. Why did these ancient Mesopotamians want a king? What were the first kingdoms like? And how did this whole system of government get started? These are the questions we'll tackle today. But first, let me introduce myself. I am the host. And this is my channel, where we learn how the world got so screwed up in only 100 seconds. You can watch videos about all kinds of topics, from ancient history to pop culture. So hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. In the late Neolithic period, small groups of people known as tribes roamed around Mesopotamia. These tribes lived off the land and raising flocks of animals, and had no permanent homes, moving from place to place as their resources became depleted or seasons changed. As a result, we don't have much archaeological evidence for what life was like for these ancient Mesopotamians. What we do know comes from a few pieces of pottery, animal bones, and primitive stone tools. The people of Mesopotamia during the Ubaid period were semi-nomadic herders who moved with their animals and followed a seasonal round of grazing lands, traveling in small family groups and speaking dialects of a common language. Their society seems to have been egalitarian, without chiefs or other leaders to direct them. Life probably wasn't easy, though, since food supplies could be unpredictable, and hostile neighbors often attacked them. As time went on, more and more tribes began to settle down in one place for most of the year and plant crops. Around 3200 BC, these sedentary agriculturalists had larger granaries than the nomadic herders, and were able to feed more people. So as population grew, competition for land and water intensified, which led to conflict. By 2900 BC, warfare was widespread, and around 2800 BC, a new social hierarchy emerged, creating the first kingship in the Fertile Crescent. Although historians debate exactly how it happened, it was likely that warriors at the top of Mesopotamian society used superior skills and weapons to dominate others. They established fortified settlements, organized armies, and maintained a strict social order. Under this new system, a king commanded an elite military force, and collected taxes in the form of labor and goods from the people he ruled over. It's hard to imagine anyone wanting to be a king after hearing this. Not only does it sound like a huge responsibility, but it also sounds incredibly stressful. But don't worry, being a king has its perks. And in ancient Mesopotamia, the king was considered a god on earth. Rulers enjoyed divine kingship, which gave them ultimate authority over their subjects, and allowed them to collect tribute and live in luxury while their subjects toiled to meet impossible quotas. The earliest accounts of kingship in Mesopotamia come from the Sumerians, who lived in the southern part of the region. In their epic tale, the king Enmerkar travels to the celestial realm to retrieve divine grain and establish agriculture in Mesopotamia. After returning to Earth, he rules wisely, and his people prosper. In another Sumerian myth, the goddess Ninsun bears the first king, named Kish, who establishes the city of Ur. In both stories, kingship brings civilization and prosperity to the land. The first historically confirmed king of Mesopotamia was On, who ruled the city of Kish around 2700 BC. Though his empire was short-lived, it marked a significant turning point in history. As the founder of the third dynasty of Kish, An was the first ruler in a long line of monarchs that would shape the course of Mesopotamian history for centuries to come. Throughout Mesopotamia, the early kings controlled cities, surrounding villages, and economic activity such as trade. For example, the rulers of Lagash controlled the lucrative trade in cedar wood from the mountains of the Amanus, and the kings of Umma gained control of important temples dedicated to powerful deities like Enki, the god of wisdom and magic. Early kings used their power to build large buildings like temples and palaces, which required a lot of manpower and resources. This led to the creation of skilled labor classes made up of artisans and administrators. Palace administration oversaw taxes, public works, and the military. They kept records on clay tablets, which provided valuable insights into daily life in ancient Mesopotamia. In fact, many of our oldest surviving pieces of writing are from these early kingdoms. The earliest writings were probably kept on perishable materials like papyrus, wood, or leather, but those obviously haven't survived the test of time. Clay tablets were cheaper and more durable, so they were sometimes fired in kilns to preserve them. Most of these clay tablets contain business transactions, but some are legal documents or literary works. One of the most famous pieces of writing from the time is the Code of Ur-Nammu, which dates back to around 2050 BC. It was created by the king of Ur III and contains 28 laws written in a literary style that's easier to read than earlier texts. Like many other ancient legal codes, it covers everything from property rights to criminal law. Its influence can be seen in later Mesopotamian legal codes, including the Code of Hammurabi, which you might be familiar with if you've ever heard the phrase "an eye for an eye." During the reign of Ur-Nammu, the Akkadian Empire encompassed much of Mesopotamia and stretched as far north as the Mediterranean Sea. Despite its vast size, the empire was relatively peaceful and prosperous. In fact, Ur-Nammu's rule is often seen as a golden age in Mesopotamian history. Although Mesopotamia is often remembered as a chaotic and war-torn region, the reality was much more nuanced. Early kings worked to maintain peace and stability within their borders, allowing for cultural and economic exchange to flourish. But not everyone benefited from the rise of kingship. As kings became more powerful, they took more land and resources for themselves and the growing number of administrators and soldiers in their courts. At the same time, warfare continued to be widespread throughout Mesopotamia. The constant threat of violence forced people to rely on the protection of the king. Another challenge for early Mesopotamian kingdoms was the harsh environment. Floods, droughts, and famines were common occurrences that tested the resilience of both the people and the kings. To cope with these challenges, Mesopotamians developed sophisticated systems of irrigation and built massive walls to protect their cities from flooding. As time went on, kings continued to build their power and influence across Mesopotamia, leading to the emergence of several powerful empires. The Akkadian Empire, founded by Sargon of Akkad in the 24th century BC, was the first to unite much of Mesopotamia under a single ruler. It was followed by the third dynasty of Ur, which controlled trade routes across the Persian Gulf, and the Old Babylonian Empire, which reached its peak during the reign of Hammurabi. Despite the challenges they faced, The early kingdoms of Mesopotamia left a lasting legacy. They laid the foundation for the world's first cities, established the concept of kingship, and developed many of the innovations that made Mesopotamian civilization possible. But it wasn't just Mesopotamia. Around the same time, the first kingdom was emerging in another part of the world. There are three main regions where early civilizations arose. In addition to Mesopotamia, these areas include the Nile River Valley, and North Africa, and the Indus River Valley. Ancient Egyptians and Indus Valley civilizations developed along similar timelines and in comparable ways to Mesopotamian kingdoms. In Egypt, a centralized government emerged as early as 3100 BC, when King Minos, the first united Upper and Lower Egypt, Key, and subsequent pharaohs controlled the flow of goods along the Nile and maintained order and stability. Across the empire, the Egyptians developed a complex system of hieroglyphics and built monumental structures, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. Meanwhile, on the Indian subcontinent, the Indus Valley, civilization thrived between 2800 and 1800 BC. Its urban centers, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, boasted advanced systems of plumbing and drainage, and evidence suggests that the civilization had a strong central authority. But these ancient kingdoms weren't the only ones. During the second millennium BC, new kingdoms arose across the Middle East and Africa. The Mitanni Empire centered around the city of Tukriti, and controlled much of northern Mesopotamia. The Hittite Empire dominated Anatolia and parts of Syria. In Africa, the kingdom of Kush flourished in the Nile Valley. These kingdoms each had their own unique characteristics and accomplishments, but they also faced similar challenges. They grappled with issues of succession, balancing the power of the central government with local rulers, and maintaining stability in a time of constant change. As the ancient kingdoms of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley demonstrate, the emergence of kingship was a pivotal moment in human history. It marked the beginning of organized government, centralized power, and the development of the world's first cities. While the early kings faced numerous challenges, they also achieved remarkable feats of governance, engineering, and cultural achievement. But the story doesn't end here. The legacy of these ancient kingdoms continued to shape the course of human history for millennia to come. Now, it's time for your quiz. Which of these answers is correct? 2 points for each. Write your answers on a piece of paper, and then put them in the comments. What was the name of the first Mesopotamian king whose empire lasted for centuries? How many main regions were there where early civilizations independently arose? Which of these kingdoms was located in the Nile River Valley? If you got 2 out of 3 correct, you get a bronze crown. If you got 1 out of 3 correct, you get a silver crown. And if you got 0 out of 3 correct, well, maybe you should try watching the video again. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week when we continue to explore how the world got so screwed up.